who comes from the Ethiopian Women Lawyers Association. Her name is Mastawal Habtamu, and she's serving as a board member of the Ethiopian Lawyers Association. So what she will be saying will be on behalf of women and young girls out there who are involved in environmental governance. So she will be giving a speech. If you see your agenda, that was scheduled for the morning session, but due to logistical arrangements, it didn't take place in the morning. So she will have the floor now to talk about environmental governance from the perspective of women and young girls. Mastawal, you can come to the floor. So after her presentation, we'll go directly to the report back session from each group on knowledge management and pollution. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Thank you for the introduction. My name is Mastawal. I understand that I'm a very new face to many of you. Can you hear me? So I understand that I bring a very new face to the audience. I'm a lawyer by profession, and I'm an attorney at law. I'm a consultant on different programs such as the corporate governance program that the World Bank has. I also work on fragile and conflict states that is mostly related with agriculture, water use rights, etc. And I'm also a board member of the Ethiopian Women Lawyers Association, and I'm a long-time member of that same association. So though I wear different hats, I come in my capacity as a member and board member of the Ethiopian Women Lawyers Association today to you. So considering the very short notice that I was given to do this presentation, I have not prepared a PowerPoint for you. Apologies for that. So I would just be speaking off the top of my mind and from the very concise notes that I prepared in a haste. So I'd like to limit my words and my focus on what useful things I can say to you from two perspectives. One is the perspective from a lawyer. The other one is of the perspective of a woman lawyer as a member of the Ethiopian Women Lawyers Association. Because I'm speaking again from a lawyer's perspective, I will be using the terms environmental degradation, climate change, POPs, probably interchangeably, and those may be, very important to you. They are important to you and a bit technical, but bear with me because I speak from a lawyer's perspective again. So, it goes without saying that environmental degradation, climate change, or POPs do not affect everyone in the same manner. They vary across regions, across continents, across nations, social strata, development levels, economic and cultural factors. Then the list is long. So if you look at the global trend, environmental change, environmental degradation, climate change, and the others affect the poor continents such as Asian, African continent nations. And you go down again to the nations level, it affects poor nations. Again, go down and narrow it down to the level of community members. It affects marginalized, underprivileged members of the community. And the groups or the members of community members that are underprivileged, marginalized, that I would like to raise now and discuss are, of course, women and children. Coming from a women's association, again, that's the priority. Women and children would be our priority areas. Again, speaking in terms of environmental change, climate change, and so on, the component from a gender perspective would be indispensable and of very paramount importance. And so environmental, how does it affect? So to many, it could be really far-fetched to connect environment and gender. And I understand that many of you understand and are well aware of how climate change and gender, how climate change and women are related. But sometimes the very crucial components or factors could be overlooked. So I will be trying to very briefly highlight how these are intertwined. Women, gender, and environmental change or degradation are intertwined. So when we talk of gender, I'm sure we understand that we come from, we are talking about the gender imbalance, the existing gender inequality. So the very first thing, the very first impact on gender, on women that environmental degradation, POPs, climate change bring is that the already existing inequalities, the already existing gender inequalities will certainly be exacerbated by such degradation, by such incidents. How that is to happen is the less resources there are, the more the fight will be for the resources. And with existing inequalities, I'm sure you can imagine which one wins or which one comes out victorious. So women could be very easy targets or victims of such impacts. The other one is maternal health, neonatal health. If you look at the sectors, it has been said earlier in the morning that agriculture is one very important or prevalent sector where that is affected by environmental change. So looking at agriculture, looking at, again, especially the sector, horticulture sector, women are, like, for example, if you look at horticulture, 90% of workers on flower farms, vegetable, fruit farms are women. So you go down to the existing reality, look at it, and we also have worked on projects where we have come across 18-year-old girls, 19-year-old girls who have already stopped having their menstrual cycles, who have stopped giving birth at the age of 20, 21, 22. So maternal health, neonatal health, stillbirth, infant mortality, and so on are directly affect women in the agriculture, if you look at the sector-wise. And then access to resources will be limited. Women mostly are the parts of community who work very closely with natural resources, and they will be directly affected when access to those resources is limited. And again, this indirectly leads to gender-based violence, as they will be forced to go long distances to find resources, lack of education because they will be spending most of their time looking for resources, working in very hostile situations are the situations that women face on almost a daily basis. And then these all lead again to disaster. In cases of natural disaster, again, that most likely will be followed by conflicts. They cannot migrate as men can because of intolerable climatic conditions, They have to care for the family. They will be carrying children around, so they won't be able to migrate as women can do. And again, in incidents of violence and conflict, they will be exposed to criminal activities such as rape, gang rape, human trafficking. Women are the most likely that will be trafficked in case of conflicts. So to name just a few of the impacts that climate change, environmental degradation, and POPs have on women, and as a result of the gender imbalance, this will be the very few. Now, what to do about this? What can be done about this? I will try to address this in light of 2 points, in light of 2 perspectives, as I started before, in light of one, a lawyer's perspective, in light of, again, a gender perspective. To start from the latter, from the women's or gender perspective, what can be done? How can we address this? How can we mitigate the impact that these situations bring to women? One is advocating for more gendered or for more focused legislation. This necessarily need not be done by a lawyer or by the regulator, but stakeholders, direct or indirect, can work on advocating for more gendered legislation that deals with environmental issues and enabling rural women, as rural women are the ones that are mostly affected by such incidents, enabling rural women to participate in environmental planning, finance, budgeting, and policy-making processes. Empowering women, again, as we always tend to say, empowering women, especially in the education side, would be very important, providing opportunities for women. The other one is more investment for gendered investigation of environment, climate, POP-related issues. Like if we look at the agriculture sector, if we look at horticulture sector, where women are widely at work. So making, getting rid of the neutrality, it's a deafening neutrality. I mean, the silence can sometimes be deafening. So gender has somehow become an indispensable component, be it investment in business, environment, you name it. So getting rid of the silence, the neutrality, and running a more gendered investigation of such issues is, again, a way to deal with that problem. Make climate finance more gender sensitive, to make it less neutral. Encouraging and allocating funds to movements such as the CHIPCO movement, the Green Belt movement. If you refer to it, the CHIPCO movement is an environment sensitive movement in India that started in the 1970s. The Green Belt movement started in Kenya, again in around the end of 1970s by Wangari Maathai. So encouraging and allocating funds to such movements will also be one way of addressing the issue of environmental degradation, POPs, climate change vis-a-vis gender or vis-a-vis women. Looking at it from a regulatory, legal or monitoring perspective, I would like to raise just 2 points. One is, I had mentioned during the breakout sessions yesterday, I understand that the entire audience, the entire team was not together, but very refined, a very thorough stakeholder mapping would be a good way to address this issue from a regulator's, from a legal point of view. So once those stakeholders are carefully mapped, and that mapping is refined, we know whom to address, we know whom to involve in, for example, codification process, legislation process, and so on and so on. The other one is involving those identified stakeholders to address these diverse legislative issues. Sometimes there are really significant inconsistencies between 2, 3, or more laws that are enforced in this same nation. We could have the environmental law, we could have the investment law, and then the company laws. So we see so many inconsistencies, so many gaps and loopholes. And once those stakeholders are identified and they can work in a concerted effort, it would be much easier to identify those inconsistencies. I'd like to mention just few proclamations, few laws that are directly related with environmental issues. If you look at the new proclamation, the refugee law, we have a very ambitious, a very revolutionary, a very positive refugee law in Ethiopia, one of a kind, that allows refugees to get work permits, to get resident permits. We have allowed refugees to get work permits. How do you see it in light of deforestation, in light of the right to work, in light of water use rights, land use rights? Again, when you see the reality, we don't actually have water pricing laws, water use laws. So in a nation such as this, it's really difficult to accommodate everything all in once unless we work in cooperation, in synergy with other stakeholders to address the issue of environment, climate change, and so on and so on. Again, when you look at the land law, it differs from region to region. We don't have a well up-to-date law that addresses the reality on the ground. Land laws, water use laws. Like I said, water is not priced. We don't have appropriate really laws that address how natural resources must be allocated, how natural resources must be used, must be priced, whether they need to be priced, how the license or certificate is to be attained, and so on and so on. Tax laws. The list is long, but once the stakeholders are identified, it would be good to look at the legislations, the laws in force, so that we avoid any inconsistency and we are able again to fill the gaps that exist and are really detrimental to environment protection, mitigating problems or impacts of climate change, and so on and so on. So this is just in brief. With the short notice, I have tried to just briefly summarize the relationship, the impacts, and what can be done. And I know that I will regret it for long if I leave this stage without asking the audience this question and leave it for you as food for thought. So coming from UNDP, EPI, the different NGOs, the different institutions, let's take this as a home take assignment. What can we do to mitigate the impacts of environmental degradation, climate change, on women? This would be my food for thought for you today. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Master. That was a really powerful reflection. We appreciate that you prepared these talking points just in a very short notice. I agree with you that what needs to be done to mitigate the impacts of climate change is one of the biggest questions for this group, but also what needs to be done to make climate response inclusive is also another question. So we are glad that you have given us this opportunity to learn more about how to engage vulnerable groups, or maybe women, young girls, and also others in climate response. So this consultation process will continue through April and May. So in the May event, we are going to have a second round national consultation, and we hope that the organizers will bring in more voices from persons with disability, from also women-led and women-focused grassroots organizations, as well as youth groups. So we are looking forward to hearing more from these groups. Maswal, again, I'd like to thank you for your reflection and also for reminding us of women's role in environmental governance and climate action. So now it's time for hearing the reflection from each group. The first group discussed about environmental pollution and also Ethiopia's response to environmental pollution. And that discussion or reflection will be given by Mr. Girma and Dr. Mesfin. And the second reflection would be from the second group that discussed knowledge management. That would be by Itadak. Yes, and Mr. Itadak and his fellow group member. So then after we'll have a Q&A, and then that will bring us closer to the end of the today's task. So may I invite Dr. Mesfin and Mr. Girma to the podium. I hope you'll take note of the reflections and suggestions and also thoughtful recommendations from these groups, and then ask questions when we approach to the plenary session.
Thank you, Dr. Csos. In the group discussion, we've been going through a lot of questions and suggestions from the audience, which is ranging from raising the questions of the existing pollution and suggesting the policy intervention which we need to look at after getting back to home. So we have tried to summarize the suggestions that made by the group into four. One is the need for strengthening the policy framework in general, based on the existing gap identification. This is one of the major area which was touched by many of the colleagues in the group. So we need to strengthen the legal framework. We need to enforce the legal framework that we have currently, as well as institutional strengthening in terms of cooperation is one of the pillars which we suggest, the group suggests to the podium. The second suggestion was we summarized like this: the need for information and awareness. A lot of participants that have been raised, even the level of pollution that we are currently in terms of it could be air, water, or soil. But this the level of pollution and measures which needs to be taken are not well aware by many of the society, even the policymakers themselves. So this has to be to do very far by giving more information and awareness for based on the needs. The third summary that we made from the discussion and the comment and the questions which was raised from the group, the need for strengthening institutional framework from the enforcement. This ranges from the enforcement to the establishing or reestablishing existing institutions. There are some institutions who are actually working on the management of like chemicals here and there. So some institutions are even they import chemical they need. This by itself, it's a problem when it comes to the betterment of the chemical management. So we have to strengthen our institutions in terms of responding to the enforcement of the laws that we have currently. The other one is the fourth recommendation, which we try to summarize, is related with investment. So the experts of the group, they suggest that the need of technology, we have to just back ourselves with technologies to manage the stockpile that we have currently. We need the laboratories which can actually analyze the level of pollution, even the kind of pesticide or chemicals we want to utilize at the country level. So this needs a well-organized laboratory. So we need to have an investment, or we need an investment to strengthen our laboratory infrastructures. The other is the capacity on research. Many of the research, even in terms of pollution level and the permits of the tolerance level, is depending on the finding from the other end of the world. But from the suggestions of the group, we try to summarize the needs of strengthening the capacity of our internal capacity. So in our group, most of them are related with questions, but we try to summarize what has to be needed or what to be improved for the betterment of the environment, and to change or the existing scenario of the impact of chemical and waste management. Maybe my colleague, Dr. Masfin, will add some points I missed from my side. Thank you. Dr. Masfin, you have something to say? Yeah. Yeah. Dr. Kasaon, we didn't go through the question which is raised by the participant, but we try to summarize in terms of the guiding questions. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thank you to all group members, and thank you to Mr. Gurma for the wonderful presentation. If there are any questions, thoughts, and suggestions, we do have a plenary session after Group 2 presentation, so get prepared for that. I would like to invite the presenter from Group 2 to tell us more about knowledge brokering and knowledge management for policy impact, and also for raising public awareness.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Kasaon. So this is Group 2 that's mainly has been discussing on this knowledge management and communication and influencing policy. It was chaired by actually so the first question was what kind of tools and mechanisms should we use to ensure climate knowledge is shared to influence policy? As the first group's presenter said, there were a lot of questions raised from the participants, while we're supposed to answer the question and discuss this issue. So we started saying policy makers should be informed decision makers, and for that the relationship between this knowledge generating institutes or researchers and policy makers should be strengthened. So the question here is, what kind of knowledge should be communicated and to whom? So again, yeah, I mean, these policymakers, as we know, are very much occupied with different priorities and the like. So the information that we are going to communicate to them has to be very much concise and to the point, and with less technical jargons. So for that, we said this information and knowledge should be customized well, and we have to have also relevant and effective communication mechanisms. I mean, we may not kind of prepare huge volume of reports for a policymaker on a specific sector and the like, but it has to be very much concise. And there are actually a lot of communication mechanisms like publications, books, policy briefs, workshops, and the like. But we have to be selective of, which are actually effective to communicate the issues. Again, in terms of how, we said a bit about how this policy development process in our country is and what should be followed, taking lessons from our previous experience. So we said it should be much focused on internal challenges and perspectives, and it also should address our local priorities while also integrated some international protocols and issues that has to be there. Again, while this policy development process should engage various stakeholders, we have to kind of from the outset we have to identify which are the key stakeholders that can contribute and will have important contribution for the policy. So we said for that, there has to be a systematic approach that we should follow to integrate knowledge into this policy formulation. So as you all know, actually, mostly this the policy development process is kind of top-down approach, but we said it has to be adjusted and changed to bottom-up, exploring the existing situation, understanding local context and communities' priorities in that process. And actually, when we say bottom-up, it doesn't necessarily mean the consultation is merely to the community, but it has to also incorporate inputs of local practitioners, researchers, and the like. What mechanisms do we have to check? And there was a question like, what mechanisms do we have to check and ensure when even the existing policies don't address community level priorities and issues? Members of this group says influencing the public by increasing awareness on climate issues at a very grassroots level, be it at school, at community conversation and the like, is very much critical. It's both important to kind of formulate policies and also to check whether the existing policies are really addressing people's priorities and needs. We also said establishing a technical advisory group in each respective agencies is very important. This will help the agencies to kind of this technical group or kind of team will explore relevant knowledge in that sector and kind of facilitates knowledge communication within that sector, and also come up with concrete and relevant issues that can be taken to policy formulation. So the second question was what's expected from policymakers to engage researcher and incentivize sharing research findings. So for this, there was a question raised from the group members saying, should really researchers ask the policymakers an incentive rather than it has to be the job of the researchers to kind of come up with relevant communication mechanisms and tailored information that will be important and can be taken up by the policymakers. So in this case, the question should be, do we have really conducive environment for the researchers to do researchers and compile findings and to communicate that to relevant stakeholders? So one of the important points that the group members raised to kind of not necessarily as incentive, but that will encourage researchers is there must be a trust from the policy maker side on science and local solutions, so that the researchers will be motivated to do more researches and to make the research more context specific and relevant to their context. So again, another mechanism that's suggested is having a transparent mechanism at a national level that can be sector specific to kind of, for the researcher to ensure whether their research findings are really relevant to that sector, and whether these findings are taken into policy formulation is very important. That will, so that they will be motivated, encouraged to do more research and make the research more practical. Again, policymakers should have also strong follow-up and evaluation mechanisms. I mean, it was mentioned that there are around 10 research institutes in Ethiopia. There are a lot of universities that are doing research here and there. So, but there is no kind of strong follow-up mechanism from the policymakers. What kind of research are really being undertaken at local level, whether they are really exploring practical, I mean, problems at their, I mean, in their locality. So the other one is, I mean, these policymakers also should give kind of attention and be attentive in events, workshops. We know, I mean, how many people were in this group, I mean, during the first day when this workshop was launched, and then because of different priorities, different people might not be here throughout the session. But the participants emphasize that there are kind of critical points where these policymakers has to be in this kind of workshops, mainly during the inception phase and during kind of dissemination, information dissemination or knowledge dissemination phase. This is important because they will learn also actually what are the findings from, I mean, this kind of researches, and they will also know what are really the challenges that researchers are facing, and also they will understand the way forward so that they will be following up in the application of the way forward action set. The researchers also should come up with problems, but not only problems, but with applicable solutions. The third question was, how can researchers design their research works that also includes outreach to the local community? So there was an example mentioned from our friend there that researchers should be demand-driven and action research so that they can come up with actual problems and applicable solutions. And supporting people doing research on thematic areas that are relevant to local community is also very important. The last question, but not the least, was how can access to research findings be increased and used by all stakeholders, be it policymakers, practitioners, and community groups and farmers. So we should say that, I mean, we say that actually we have to first define, I mean, who would be our listener and who will be the user of the information or the knowledge. And so that with that, we'll start thinking what kind of communication mechanisms we'll be applying there. So that's very important. And the other thing we mentioned is filtering the research is very important because there are kind of basic research, scientific research, and action research here and there. So we have to kind of classify which are really important for our policy formulation and the like. Again, integrating climate and information, I mean, environment knowledge into the education. Our education system is very important. This is because it will sustain the information communication at very grassroots level, and it will also help, I mean, give us the chance to apply some information and knowledge, I mean, at grassroots level, so that the children will be aware of how climate is affecting, I mean, their locality, how farmers are affected, how they are affected, how the environment is polluted, so that they will be more sensitive for this kind of issues. So for that, we have to use, I mean, various mechanisms, I mean, both mainstream media, social medias, and the like, digital platforms and technologies can be used as a mechanism to communicate this kind of information. But the main important, I mean, the important thing is we have to identify which kind of information and who will be our listener, so that we can draft or design the communication mechanism. The last important point, but not the least, is establishment of database that will be constituting research institutes and various universities in Ethiopia is very important. This can be kind of strategized based on sectors, thematic areas, so that they can be easily accessible for the users, and this will be also useful to store data so that anyone can make use of them. Sorry, I didn't introduce myself from the beginning. I'm Elias Ibrahim. I'm working in the World Food Program, and I'm the Program Policy Officer in the Climate Change Adaptation and Resilience Building Unit. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Elias, for wonderful presentation again. I think you came up with a number of recommendations, and I hope that decision makers and also practitioners will take the recommendations into consideration for future programming. So it's time for plenary. We have 2 tasks remaining. The first one is a plenary Q&A on the reflection, recommendations, suggestions from each group. If you have any question, any additional thoughts, recommendation, then it's time for you to speak up. And then after we discuss for, let's say, half an hour, then we will have a 5 minutes closing remark by Mr. Ababu to tell us what would the next step look like during the consultation process. So now it's a Q&A, open for Q&A. Anyone, any additional points, any question? ጥያቄዎች ካሏችሁ የምትጨምሩት ነገር ካለ እሺ መጨረሻ ማይኩን ሊሰጥልኝ የሚችል ሰው አለ? ኦኬ ዶክተር አደፍርስ ያ በደንብ ይቻላል። መጨረሻ ላይ ሰብሰብ አድርገህ ትራንስሌት ታደርገዋለህ ለኦንላይንም ሰዎች ስላሉ ያ
small suggestion to the environment, I could say, in Ethiopia, indeed, there are many research organizations doing research on the environment, but I strongly suggest that Ethiopian environmental system, specifically EPA now, need to have strong research system. This could be a small group which will form, the policy making process. Otherwise, I don't think EPA will be strong enough in making decisions to protect the environment, because this is the government is responsible to protect the environment, regulate the environment, but without data that they themselves produce, I don't think there will be enough to make a very good decision. Indeed, research information can come from other research institutions, universities, and also research NGOs, but I don't think really that is going to be enough for them. And I have been speaking about this several times, even when EPA is preparing this regulatory to be approved by the Council of Ministers. I wanted to really utilize this opportunity here to again encourage them to have a research department that will inform the process of decision making to protect the country's environment. That I want to say.
Thank you so much, Dr. Adafras. This looks like a recommendation, a very strong one. If anyone wants to add to that or maybe reflect on what Dr. Adafras has just said, then you are free to do that. Any additional feedback from the group? From participants, any question? Yes, over there. You'll be next.
So I do clarify that, but I feel that we have limitation when land conservation so you have White House. Congratulations, because they are very expensive. So it is hard. Jadi our that's I would
Thank you so much. I think the organizers have heard you. Yeah, it's true. Every stakeholder should be able to share their lessons and also experiences with others. So this is a piece of advice to the organizer. So it's well taken. Ndasha, and then you'll be next.
Okay, my name is just clarification on the virus. There is one model suggested which indicates bridging the gaps of research and the policy making. So in that, different actors are being included. And, in my opinion, key actors are missed in that model, that civil society organizations are generating a number of evidences, be it on practice or researches, particularly action research. So it is important to include the civil society organizations as they are generating evidences.
We agree. If there is any reflection from Itatak, then I'll give you a chance later, Itatak. Not now. Yeah.
Thank you very much for this opportunity. Yeah, first of all, the presenter will present something about pesticides and came up with the idea of strengthening the ecosystem. And when I heard that, and if you connect that with also the reflection from the gender perspective, what comes to my mind is the fact that when you look at the current environmental jurisprudence, now there's a move towards actually making constitution much stronger. If you go online, look at the constitution of Ecuador, Bolivia, Colombia, they have made actually they have made nature as a subject of rights. They have given legal personality, which means a river can actually sue you. An ecosystem can sue you. In that sense, if you pollute a river, you be actually subjected to cleaning up. And he has a legal personality, presented by the So that is the legal, approach now to environmental management, which is just coming up stronger. So when you go to Stockholm, some of these will actually come into play. That is one. The other element is about when we talk about landscape restoration. The current trend is that actually there's an ongoing campaign about save the soil. Because it is championed by this guru from India. The argument is that if you look at the soil, the organic content of soil is actually collapsing. And if nothing is done, if it's done in 50 years, a lot of areas will have to be back and you will not be able to recover them. So that campaign also fits into the kind of discussion that we are having now. So it will be good when you continue to maybe the next phase, it will be good to reflect over all these global processes and to be able to inform the national. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. That's also another advice and suggestion to the organizer. So that will be considered during the upcoming consultation process. Another reflection, question on environmental policy, on the group reflections on environmental pollution and knowledge communication. Dr. Adolphus, I didn't want to give a second chance to pick. ይሻላልሽ
አሁን ባለበት ፖሊሲ አሁን እዚህ ኢትዮጵያ ሃይላንድ ላይ ደረጃ ኦሮሚያ ኦሮሚያ ላይ የሚነሳ ብክለት አፋር ላይ ሄዶ ለሚያደርሰው ብክለት በአማራ ሃይላንድ ላይ የሚነሳ ብክለት በዲግራዴሽን ቤኒሻንጉል ላይ የሚያደርሰው ጉዳት በሶማሌ ላይ የሚያደርሰው ጉዳት የምንከላከልበት ደረጃ ላይ ያለው አለ። የታችኛው ተፋሰስ ላይኛው ተፋሰስ ላይ የላይኛው ተፋሰስ በሚያደርሰው ጉዳት ምክንያት የታችኛው ተፋሰስ ላይ የሚደርሰው ጉዳት ወርታይና ብሎ የሚጠይቅበት ወይም ማጠቃለያ የሚጠይቅበት አሰራር ሀገራት ውስጥ አለ ወይ? በምናልባት በሚቀጥለው ዙር ዲስከሽን የሌሎቹ ሰዎች እንዳይሰጡ ማለት ለበቀጠሉበት ይችላል። የሚቀጥለው ውይይት ይሄ አይነቱ ማለት ለኢኮኖሚ የሚያስትሮንግ መወያያ ፕሮስ ጋርመንታል ነው አገወዝ ቦርደር የለው አዋሽ ሲነሳና አፋር ነው የሚያውቁ በጣም ተራራ ማራራ ላይ ተነስቶ እስከ ቱርካና ይሄዳል። በዚህ ባሌ ሃይላንድ ላይ የተነሱ ወንዞች ባሌ ወካቸው ድረስ ይሄዳሉ። ከዛ የተነሳው ግብጽ ድረስ ይሄዳል። ወደ ናቸው ወንዞቻችን አፋር ላይ ሲሆን እንደዚህ ነው ዋይ ላይ አንዱ ጋር የሚሆነው ጋር ሌላኛው ጋር ለሚያደርሰው ጦስ ሌላኛውን የታችኞቹን ደግሞ ከላይኛው በሚመጣላቸው ሰርቪስ ምክንያት የላይኛውን የሚነግፉበት አሰራር አለ። ይሄ ነው ካደረገው ሪጂናል ማርኬት ልናየው እንችላለን። ግብፅና ሱዳን ውሃ ብቻ መጠበቅ ያለባቸው ከኢትዮጵያ በቤቶቻችን ውሃ ብቻ በሚጠብቁት ወይስ የኢትዮጵያን ሃይላንድ እናለማን እናጠናክር ዝናቡን በአግባቡ ወተሩ በቤዚክ ውስጥ በአግባቡ እንዲፈስ መደገፍ የለባቸው ወይ? ለዚህ አይነት ዲስከሽን ውይይት መቼ ነው የምንጀምረውና የምንጠይቀው የሚለው ነገር ምናልባት ኦርጋናይዘሮቹ የሚቀጥለው ስቴፕ ሁለተኛው ፌዝ ላይ እንዲህ አይነት ተለቅ ያሉ ትንሽ የሚያወያዩ ሀሳቦች የሚጨመሩበት ጥሩ የሆኑ ገሮች የሚል ሀሳብ ማንሳት ነው። ጊዜ ሆና ነበረ መናገር የመጣው ች ነበረ መናገር የመጣው
ሁለቱንም ተቀብለናል። በጣም ጥሩ ሪኮሜንዴሽኖች ናቸው። I think we can brainstorm some ideas around the issue of environmental compliance. Maybe Mr. Grima, you can say a few things about the first question raised by Dr. Adolphus, and the other point is about payment for ecosystem services. ከዛ ጋር የሚገናኝ ነገር መስሎ ነው የሚሰማኝ። So ያ እንዴት ኢንክሉድ ይደረጋል የሚቀጥሉት አጀንዳዎች ላይ የሚለውን we will discuss with the organizers. So while you think about questions or reflections, let me give a chance to the group representatives to respond to the questions. I would like to first, okay, Mr. Grima, about the environmental compliance. And then Yetadak will follow about the exclusion of CSOs from, if there is any exclusion anyway.
Thank you so much. The most policy that we have, yes, the past 3-4 years, we tried to restore the existing frameworks to respond in balance to prevent pollution and deal with those who are very polluting. They try to be responsible. of course, a lot of issues must come first before we are going to respond to each and every single pointers, because there are economic issues actually comes first by the government, by the society. Of course, our ability to identify the is addressed as a capacity. So, in terms of policy, we do follow the limitation of the policy itself. That's why, because we are now revising the policy itself. Of course, there are also a lot of activities which is related to assessing the existing legal framework and identifying the major gaps they have in for instance, I can write the issue of the standard. Some of the standards we brought the approach without even identifying the needs and the challenge that we have at the ground. So a lot of questions are raised in the standard, in the legal instrument that we have, in the policy itself. So that's why we are trying to assess the major gaps and the measures which need to fill up these gaps. So I think the policy is everywhere, even the upper level, lower level, or some of the policy, some of the environmental challenges, or the area of environmental challenges. We have a legal framework, but I think it needs to be worked further to strengthen the institutions, give them and provide information to do their job and come up with evidence whether the polluters are pay or not. Those are the issues under discussion, and some are also practiced. So I think this is what I can say. There are activities, there are people, but they are not here. So we need to strengthen some those to respond to the existing policy. Thank you.
Yeah, maybe Mansour, I will give a chance, but okay, Mansour, maybe either Mansour or Girma can respond to. Let me remind you one question that was raised by Dr. Adefres. Is there any consultation process to establish a research unit or maybe a strong research by the EPA? Yes. And where is that?
Sorry, I forgot to respond to me. Yes, there is an effort where we are, as knows, we are trying to develop the legislation to establish the EPA. Formerly it was the AFCC, a lot of months ago here and there. Actually, we had a research wing, which is not that much strong, but there is a discussion and practical activities to incorporate the research wing in EPA itself. Unless we don't have a strong research wing, unless we don't have the strong laboratory, those infrastructures to make sure whether pollution is there or not, or to know whether pollution is there or not, we don't act like an EPA. So there is a consensus and an agreement between experts and our higher official to establish a strong research group. And what we don't know what of course there is a draft article, we don't know what will happen, but our need is our higher officials, our experts need to have a strong research group.
Wonderful. So there are some discussions going on and there are some efforts there. And I hope that you will take into account knowledge management issues in the proclamation as well as while you start establishing the research department. Mr. Mansour, for reflection.
Okay.
Question or reflection?
Reflection. So, I think I would like to just present
say a few words about what Dr. Alex read, because he raised a very difficult issue because discussing in the 2 days about global environmental problem, even not between regions, within the region, within the intra issues, but also we have discussed about multi-environmental agreements. So, you know, as already well know, we can apply and also updated a lot of environmental agreements so as to just address those cross-boundary effects of environmental challenges. That's why it has ratified a lot of actions. And also, there are also attempts to have such kind of platform to discuss on that one. I don't think how much, I don't know how much they are related or efficient. For example, we do have 9 initiatives that address water issues across the field of applied river. And also we have a strategy forum. This strategy forum discussing such kind of critical issues with its members. Members of the forum include all, I can say, countries who are supporting environmental actions in Ethiopia. But actually, yes, I totally agree that we need to have a strong platform that bring on board those, especially neighboring countries, and also those are within the country. So I really agree with that one. We have to discuss and also think over that one. Of course, Dr. Adams also led the Green Legacy Initiative. One of its objectives is just integrating neighboring countries with planting trees, where we successfully even just provide seedlings. We have even just produced seedlings with no cost and also provide that seedlings to our neighboring countries for us to address environmental challenges across these neighboring countries. We Ethiopians are really understand and also believe that environmental challenges cannot be solved by productions of Ethiopia. But we need to have such kind of platform that bring on all those countries, and also not only as such in neighboring countries, but also the global world. And also we do have, there are of course articles from the EPSI to establish environmental council which that include regional authorities and also federal institutions and also government to bring on board such. I hope that may be successful in the time to come. And in terms of the research, I am the one engaging in the just drafting the structure for EP. Just as Germa said, we are also thinking of that one. We have to have a strong laboratory at least, and also research so for informed decision making. That's Thank you very much.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Mr. Mansour. So another question is on the role of Csos in linking science, science policy and practice interface, and their role in knowledge management to Itatek. You did not include in them in your presentation, right?
Yeah, I think.
Can you tell us the reason why?
I think thank you for raising that. I think the idea is practitioners when we design or rather mention practitioners, CSOs, CPOs were considered as practitioners, not specifically identified as knowledge brokers, but rather users of policy. That's why we did not include that from what I gathered from you is CSOs are also knowledge generators, which I think we need to include that, and it's highly noted. I'm going to revise and include CSOs specifically. CSOs.
Thank you, Mr. Itadak. Does that answer your question? Fantastic. So another round of opportunity for you guys to ask questions on the presentations. Any question, reflection on pollutions and knowledge management? Yeah, so I think if you don't have any additional points, this will be the end of the plenary as well as the presentations for the first round of national consultation for Stockholm plus 50. I'd like to thank you all for your active participation, for your presentation, and also for the very exciting times that we have had over these 2 days. I'd like to now invite Mr. Ababu from the UNDP to maybe say a few words about the inclusion of EUCA as a presenter, the inclusion of other vulnerable groups in upcoming discussions, and also when are we going to discuss the issue of payment for ecosystem services? Is it going to take place during this upcoming national consultation, or are we going to have a separate session for this? So this and other questions will be dealt with by So yeah, regarding the upcoming sessions, Mr. Abab will tell us what will happen next in the process of this national dialogue, and then he will call upon Mr. Mansour to give us a closing remark for the session. Thank you so much, everyone.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much, colleagues, for your active participation in these 2 days on this very important consultation for Ethiopia, national consultation on Stockholm plus 15. Your active participation is highly appreciated and very much taken note by UNDP and also the government side. We have recorded all of your input, comments, and suggestions in the Zoom meeting, and you can also see it in the YouTube of UNDP. It has been registered lively, so it is well recorded. And the other point, the coming session will take place on May 5 to 6, which is not very far. And we kindly request the EPA and of course UNDP as well to start the process as soon as possible, so that we'll have adequate time to invite all the relevant stakeholders without missing any of them. So that is our assignment. And the other one is there will be Spark Blue UNDP created. We'll put all, Ethiopia has got its own chapter there. In the Ethiopian chapter, we'll put the summary and the important findings of these consultations. And you are free to comment on that Spark Blue. We have your email address. You'll be invited and you'll participate actively, equally, like in person on Spark Blue. Also, you can participate and comment on that. And lastly, I would like to thank all the organizers, the speakers, the moderators, and all colleagues in EPA for their active engagement in organizing this event, also the development partners for participating actively in this national consultation session. Having this said, I would like to invite Mr. Mansour to officially close this session. Mr. Mansour, you have the floor.
Thank you once again. I don't have, I have talked a lot yesterday and tomorrow. I mean, yesterday and today. I don't have to say anything to add. Just to say, as official word on behalf of Ethiopia EPA, Environmental Protection Authority, I would like to thank you all for your coming and also active participation. Your active participation makes our national consultation very alive and very interesting. Really, I would like to appreciate and also please make a grateful for you by clapping your hand. And also special thanks goes to UNDP, UNEP as a back, and also Swedish government who are supporting us financially to organize such this consultation and also the next consultation. Really, we appreciate all the partners who are really just usual support for us. Really, thank you very much again for your support and also continued action for practical solution to our challenges in terms of environment. So I would like to again invite you to come in the next May session. That will be also very interesting. We will try to our best to improve some of the challenges, maybe some I don't think all the organizations and some maybe faults maybe happen in this session. We'll discuss internally all of the success and also challenges in terms of organizing and also inviting some more people into just per the suggestions and comments we have received from all you guys. So I really invite you to come on May 5 and 6 and also to follow. And also I beg you to continue your engagement and also active participation in our just implementation of our environmental policies and all our endeavors of the country to be prosperous country in the coming 10 years. Thank you very much again. Thank you.
Yeah, few logistical announcement. Where my colleague Eden is here, those coming from regions, you are entitled to collect your daily subsistence allowance from her. Now she's at the back. Thank you very much and wish you good night.
And also there's coffee and tea outside.
Yeah, coffee and tea outside there. And we will have group photos. Group photos we love. Please join us in group photos.